Welcome to Stories of the Free. This story Robert Hertix back to 1879 follows the life of Nathaniel, a enslaved boy whose active kin installed a den wolf babud, weeks later, be rebelled in a way no one could have foreseen. It's a remarkable and happy story, so please, take a breath, center yourself, and listen closely. Before we go any further, please take a moment to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're joining us from, your city and country. Your support means this story's life on, instead of further into theirs. Now, let's begin. دائرة مرتبط في مصر بدور غزبة الونتر في 1879 Ablas were feder lowest dust a romer and young lives were still tread like livestock, a 9-year-old boy committed that would echo through generations. It took a sort of wolf been chose to keep it live. 6 weeks later, that some wolf would return at the head of its back to the further. This isn't folklore, and it isn't a bedtime story minutes so chiller. This is the recorded, soul kent of Nathaniel frame, captured in 1932 by the Federators project, which characteristically captures the voice of the formerly enslaved before they vanish forever. You can still find the original document to the library of Congress, feed in their collection number 1941 Audio about experience the story, based together from his owners and supported by 3 other survivors who told the same tale. Their testimonies have been wove together, give context, and brought back to life. But their fans at the heart of it all, the unbelievable ones, are preserved exactly as they were spoke, beacon on a quote from Code Hotwood in Holmes County, Mississippi, in the autumn of 1879. This follower had been offered for 14 years. The 13th Amendment, which officially ended slavery, had been known since 1865. Reconstruction كمان went, officially concluded in 1877 with federal troops left the South as a bit of a political deal that but therefore has the White House. What followed the story is Nicola Redembish, a word whose meaning depend entirely on the color of your skin. For white landowners in the deep South, it meant their better, their social structure, and their odd way of life were finally restored. For black Americans, it meant the slow, systematic destruction of free freedom they had refrained on. Bull taxes, electricity, grandfather clauses, conflict insurable contacts designed to people in this day. And in the most isolated places, where refers solid secrets and forests had atrocities, it meant some followers. It meant slavery had never truly ended. Hotwood Plantash was 47 miles from the nearest town, reachable only by a dirt road that ran to the Frisburn and became possibly winter. The closest federal office was in Jacks, a 3-day raid door, staffed by men who had learned that investigator Holmes County was dangerous and a career killer. The local sheriff was Cornelius Hotwood, the owner's younger brother. The judge was married to the owner's sister. The preacher gave sermons justifying the natural order of the races from the Bible. In this place, at this time, Cornelius Hotwood ran his 13 record court remember the same way his father had before the war, and his grandfather before that. The 12 black laborers working his fields were technically employees. In reality, nothing had changed. The life in the same cabs where the slave people had been born and dead for 3 generations. They were to the same in the Sahars under the same sun. They were built in script that could only be spent at the plantation store, where braces were required keep a free one permanent day. That debt was then used as a legal reason to keep them from leaving. Anyone who trade was hunted or by dogs and all men. Those caught were beat publicly. Those who fought back disappeared into the Bill River, their names never spoken can. This was the world Nathaniel was born into. His mother was Betsy, a 17-year-old girl who did give birth to him in the summer of 1877. The Plantash records, still sitter in the Holmes County were cave, Lester cause of death as, hemorrhage following difficult labor. There was no doctor. The list the value of the lost worker as $320, a loss deducted from the community ledger. Nathaniel's father was solemn, so did a laboratory just 2 months before Nathaniel was born. The records show he was sent a sugarcane operation somewhere in Louisiana, but which one is lost to history. Nathaniel searched for his father his entire life and never found him. He never learned the solemn left or dead, if he had other children, or if he if no his son had surfaced. From the moment of his birth, Nathaniel belonged to no one and everyone. The women of the plantation raised him collectively, passing him from cab to cab, share water for milk, time, or strands they had. The woman who became his primary caretaker was named Jasmine, though everyone called her Mom Jessie. In 1870, she was 63 years old, born into slavery in 1807, the oldest person on the property. She was too old for field work, but too fallible at this code because she was the only healer for maize. Mom Jessie knew which shots could break a fever and which bore could stop bleeding. She could set bones and is the best cheaters. She had learned from her mother, who had learned from her mother, who had carried that knowledge across the Atlantic in a slave ship in 1789, material stolen from the Akon people in Nakon. This knowledge was Mom Jessie's brother. The Hotwoods needed her. The overseers were just a little bit afraid of her because she understood they couldn't. So she was let live in a small cab on the edge of the quarters and Moff was just a little more freedom than the others. She was also let to keep Nathaniel. He slept on racks in her corner. He thought she could spare from her rashes, which was never enough. He followed her like a shadow as she gathered herbs along the plantation's edges, those strips of land where the forest had been fully cleared. And he listened as she talked, absorbed the freeze of she knew about bats and roots and the left world, not because she formally taught him, but because teacher was as natural to her as Beza. Bez time he was faith, he could identify to those medicinal plants beside the smell. Besaf, he could make basic poultices for cats and burns. Benin, his knowledge of natural medicine would have embarrassed physicians in jacks or monks, though no doctor would have admitted, and no medical scholar would have taken him. At Enin, he was also become a work in the fields. The hotwood system butchered to work itself, taught to oscillate tasks like carrying water and picking up for the cotton balls, then gradually increase their load until, by 12, the work expected become deaths. Nathaniel was small for his age, and therefore underdeveloped, but the overseers made no lenses. The coat was the coat, fall short, and the consequences were soft. The man who enforced those consequences was named their cooker. He had arrived at Hotwood in 1875, hailed from a plantation in Lebanon that had run during a labor dispute. He was 41, married, with no family and no attachments. His entire adult life had been spent managing a slave than cause slave laborers, moving from property to property across the deep south. He was salary code at his job. What made Cocker effective was just his capacity for failures, though that was considerable. It was as ambitious. He studied the people under him. He learned their relationships, their fears, their weaknesses. He understood that a person could endure almost any physical pain their spectrum and book. So he made reconsider his specialty. He found out a person left and destroyed it in front of them. He found out a person feared and made them face it, over and over. He found out a person hoped for and shot them, systematically, that hope was weightless. He did this not of sadism, though he did a pleasure in it, but from a genuine belief that he was performing a necessary service. Order required hierarchy. Hierarchy required enforcement. And enforcement required Killarani belief that resistance was possible. Cocker noticed Nathaniel was an weak free. The boy was different. He could see it immediately. The creek was a quarter-mile from the cabins, through a stretch of forest left uncleared because the terrain was too rocky to form. Nathaniel knew the pass well. He had out it hundreds of times in the late and dark, in every season. He knew which routes to buffer and which branches to duck under. He knew where the ground was firm and where it would suck at his bare feet. He knew the forest was dangerous. The wolves and bears that once around her had been hunted nearly extinguished. The snakes were dormant in the cooler was there. The only real threat in these woods was a yom, an on-hot woodland, the most dangerous humans were behind him. So he was at afraid as he walked. He was, in a strange way, at a base. The forest accepted him. The trace the dead carrot the killer of his can status of his existence. The monly filtered through the branches was a sulfur light that made no distinction between master and slave. Here, along the Dawkins, he could almost imagine how was free. He was snacken rabbit freed when he heard the sound. It was soft at the first, so soft he thought he might have imagined it. A womber, he bitched and faint, came from somewhere else the bath. He stopped. He listened. The sound came again, and this time he was sir. Samson was it. Samson was in bed. The free survival instinct insani had developed over 9 years told him to ignore it. Curiosity was dangerous. Defiance from routine was dangerous. Any saw that the lad has returned to the quarters was a risk, and restless benchmark. The correct choice was to cut the creek, fill his bucket, and go back as fast as he could. He stood on the bath, bucket in hand, or Kion was himself. The womber came again. He lost the bath. The sun led him through a thicket of weed hole into a small clearing where a masoch had fallen during a storm years before. The tank had become rot, and a hollow had formed under the rot mass, a natural shelter but 4 feet deep. Moonlight did not reach into the hollow, but Nathaniel could hear the sun clearly now, and he could just barely make it a shove headed in the Dawkins. He narrate. He reached it slowly, though Mom Jessie had taught him to broach and animals. He expected a bosom, maybe, or a fox. What he saw in his eyes just sobbed his wrath. It was a wolf. Carrie formatted was dirt and dead. Yellow eyes cladded with fever, staring up at him was at the stressed focus. A front leg, the left one, mangled and twisted at an ankle that turned the sunny stomach. The wound was days old, at least. The flesh around it had become throat. The nefakash had spread. The animal should already be dead. But it wasn't dead. It was looking at him. And despite freezer and Sanil know about wolves, despite freezer he had heard about their danger and weapons, he didn't see a predator. He saw a creature alone and hurt and from. A creature that would in this hollow that help. A creature whose been hackneyed because he had felt himself freed of his life. He should have fought her. He knew he should have fought her. Instead, he reached into the hollow and touched the bob's head. The wolf didn't wait him. It didn't crawl or snap or show any crash. It just lay there, to wake do anything. And when Nathaniel Seneca's tissues matted fur, it made a small sound that was almost a sea. Nathaniel looked at his wound. He thought about what Mom Jessie would do. He thought about the poultices she made, how she cleaned infections with boiled water and kishkolik, the herbs she used for fever. He thought about the fact that he had an of those in him, and that if he did, he could treat a wolf here in the dark without light, without water, without time. He thought about cocoon, certainly water, certainly ready with criticism or punishment if he returned. He thought about the wolf would then alone in a hole in the ground. And then Nathaniel made a decision that would change everything. He took off his shirt, the thin coat garment that was his only protection to the October chill. He wrapped it carefully around the wolf bub, supporting his injured leg. He lifted the animal, which would barely 5 bands, and cradled it into his dress. And he began to walk, not toward the creek, not back the quarters, but deeper into the forest, toward a place no former covered tribus with Mom Jessie. There was a cavity under the roots of an inch-talk, a male from the quarters, had from an ibasa and not a new exhibit man the odo. Mom Jessie had shown it to him 2 years ago, called it her secret place, a location where she had a precious sinner's door of the war. Madness and food, and once, she admitted quickly, a reno had north. The cavity was rare and protected. It would shelter the wolf until Nathaniel could return. He reached it in the darkness, navgated by memory and money. He blessed the wolf but inside, still up in the shore. He gathered less than softest to make a bed. He spoke to the animal softly, words that meant Nasarana freeze, sense of comfort that crossed the boundary between species because Benzion fresel and kindness needs no translation. The wolf looked at him with those yellow, fever-bait eyes. Nathaniel made a promise. He returned to the creek. He filled his bucket. He walked back to the quarters with his chest bare to the coder and his hot bender so hot he was sure Cocker would hear it. Cocker was wet. The overseer stood in the moonlight at the lid of the quarters, arms crossed, watching Nathaniel emerge from the forest bath. His eyes moved over the boy, catalogue of details. The messy shirt. The dirt on his knees. The time, much longer than necessary for a simple water run. Nathaniel waited for the questions. He had prepared lies, explanations that might be plausible, if not convincing. He had fallen. He had torn his shirt on a branch. He had got lost in the darkness. Weak stories, transparent stories, but maybe not stuff with serious sophistication. Cocker said nothing. He just looked at Nathaniel for a long moment, his face readable in the shadows. Werner took the bucket from the boy's hands, examined its contents as if checking for contamination, and handed it back. Next time, he said, don't take so long. He walked away. Nathaniel stood froze, unable to believe his luck. Cocker had asked about the shirt. He had demanded explanations. He just showed a war on the left. It seemed impossible. It seemed like mercy. It wasn't mercy. It was strategy. Cocker had seen the messy shirt. He had noted the excess of time. He had observed the dirt and the innocence. But he wasn't interested in catching Nathaniel in a minor infraction. Minor infractions meant minor punishments, temporary setbacks that would achieve his larger goal. He wanted something bigger. He wanted to understand what the boy was doing, where he was going, what was important enough that he would risk punishment to pursue. He wanted the breaking point. So he would wait, he would watch. He would give the boy enough rope to himself, and then, when the moment was right, he would pull it. Nathaniel didn't know any of this. He only knew he had escaped, at least for now, and that somewhere in the forest, a wolf Bob was waiting for him to return. He barely slept that night. He lay on his bed afraid of Mom Jessie's cab, listened to her deep, steady breathing, watching the fiery flicker on the ceiling, counting the hours until he could sleep awake. The old woman seemed to sense something was different. She had looked at him strangely when he returned without his shirt, but she had asked questions. She never asked questions about things she didn't want to know the answers. The next day was endless. Nathaniel worked the fields in a trance, his body going through the motions while his men stood in the forest, in the hollow under the oak tree with the wolf Bob might already be dead. He made mistakes, small ones, enough to do Cocker's attention, but not quite enough to justify punishment. The overseer watched him all day, that patient, brutal action that had become sickeningly familiar. Nathaniel felt it like hate on his back. He tried not to react. When Dawkins finally came, he waited until the quarters had settled into the exhausted silence of night. He waited until Mom Jessie's breather dipped into true sleep. Then he moved, slowly and carefully, gathering as he went. A piece of corn bone had slipped from dinner. A clay cap that could hold water. A scrap of cloth that could serve as a bandage. And from Mom Jessie's carefully maintained supply, a bunch of dried yarrow and a small piece of willow bark, medicines he could help with fever and fetch. He stepped out of the cabin into the darkness. The forest at night was different from the forest at day. Sand and visibly suddenly became loud in the darkness. Every rustle could be a snake. Every snap could be a predator. Every shadow could be a man with a can. Nathaniel moved quickly but carefully, further the base where he might be seen, rather through undercoat that grabbed at his leg than left scratches he would have to explain later. He reached the oak tree. He knelt at the entrance to the cavity, his heart in his throat, terrified of what he might find. The wolf Bob was still alive. It was weaker than before, if that was possible. Its breathing was shallow rapid. Its eyes, when they opened, didn't focus on Anissa. But it was a razor. It was alive. And when Nathaniel reached into the hollow and touched his head, it made that some small sound, that see freknish, as if it mumbled. Nsani lorg through the night. I cleaned the wound as best I could with water from the creek, wash the dirt and idled on the bitten of the floor. I bade the roboltes, I based mad from the dreidrib and I little water, spread it carefully over the damaged flesh. I rubbed the lack in the clean cloth, creator, I banded that would protect the wound from further contamination. I fed the bub small piece of corn bone soaked in water, pushed them gently into its mouth, massaged its throat until it swallowed. As I worked, he talked. I didn't know why he talked. The wolf couldn't understand him, but the silence of the forest was oppressive, and the word seemed to help, seemed to keep both of them calm, seemed to create a bridge across the vast gap between a human child and a wild animal. He told the wolf about his life. About Mom Jessie and the herbs and the cab at his end of the quarters. About his mother, who he had never known, and his father who he would never find. About the fields and the cotton and the endless cycle of work that consumed the free weight of air. About Cockerel and the other overseers and the constant threat that hung over everyone, the knowledge that any moment could be your last moment of relative safety. He told the wolf that he understood. That he knew what it was like to be hurt and alone and fra. That he knew what it was like to be treated as less than a level creature, as a sinner to be used and schooled. That he knew what it was like to have no one to help you, no one to care whether you lived or died. He told the wolf that sinners would be different now. He would come back, he said. Every night, no matter what, he would come back. He would bring food and water and medicine. He would change the bandages. He would do whatever was necessary. He would not let the wolf die alone in a hole in the ground, though he made the Sunday, there were so many had died on this land, a more than forgot. He named the wolf Shadow. The name came to him as a reflection of what the wolf would need to be, invisible, had, a secret that existed only in the darkness, beyond the reach of the men who controlled the letters. Shadow would be his secret, and the secret would be theirs alone, and no one else would ever know. When the first light of dawn began to show through the trees, Nsani prepared leave. He checked the bandage one more time. He left a small bale of food within reach of the wolf's mouth. He promised that he would return. Shadow watched him go with those yellow eyes, still clad, still feverish. But somehow, Nsani thought, a little better than before. He made it back to the cabin just as the morning horse landed, the blast that caught the workers to another day flower. Mom Jessie was already awake, already had water over the fire, her back to him as he sobbed inside. She didn't turn around. You've been there, she said. It wasn't a question. Nsani froze. Whatever you're doing, she continued, till not turned, you be careful. You hear me? You be careful. Yes, Mom. She turned then and looked at him, and in her ancient eyes, he saw something he didn't back. Not anger, not fear, not even curiosity. Understanded. She knew? Not what exactly, but she knew that he had found something, that something had changed, that there was now a weight in his life that hadn't been there before. And instead of demanding answers, instead of forbidding him to continue, instead of doing any of the things that might have protected her from whatever consequences might come, she simply looked at him and nodded and handed him a cup of wood coffee. You're gonna need your strength, she said. Whatever it is. The days that followed were the hardest of Nsani's inner life, and also, in a strange way, the best. Every morning he rose before dawn and worked until after dark, baked cut until his fingers bled, all loads that bent his spine, and door Cochrane's concentration was a blankets that had a freeze. The free night he subbed into the forest and subbed 2 or 3 hours with Shadow, feeder the wolf, change the bandages, check the wound for sign of improvement or deterioration. The improvement came slowly, but it came. By the third day, Shadow's fever began to break. The wolf face cleared, became focused, followed Nsani's movements around the cavity. By the 5th day, Shadow was eating solid food, small pieces of meat that Nsani had backdoor stole from the communal meals. By the 7th day, the wolf tried stand, followed, and tried again. Nathaniel felt as hot was a joy that had no bliss in his life but existed new. The bond between them deepened with each visit. Shadow began to recognize the sound of Nathaniel's approach, umber softly entreated on the boy build at the interest of the casty. The wolf would nuzzle Nathaniel's hand, lick his fingers, Max and that were no quite borks and no quite wains, but somewhere in between, a brief language that blonde dominate them. Nathaniel learned another about wolves that no book could teach him. He learned they were social creatures, desperate for connection, capable of affection and loyalty that riffed the needs humans could offer. He learned Shadow had been separated from a back, probably during a hunt, and had been wandering alone when the injury happened. He learned wolves could surf it herbal ones if they had a raised surface. And that raise, for Shadow, had become Nathaniel. He was so learned he was at alone in his seeker. It happened during the third week, where Shadow was strong enough to walk short distances and Nathaniel had bitten at the wolf outside the cavity for brief periods. He was sitting with his back against the oak tree, watching Shadow explore the clearing on a steady lake, when he heard a sound behind him. He spun around, Quebecter Cochran, Quebecter Discovery, Quebecter Zen of a Friesen. It was Mom Jessie. She stood at the edge of the clearing, leaning on her walker stick, looking at Shadow's an expression Nathaniel could trade. I followed you, she said. Wanted to see what you was a protector. Nathaniel faded the word till. He opened his mouth to explain, apologies, the baker noted anyone, but no words came. Mom Jessie walked forward slowly, her eyes never for the wolf. Shadow, instead of run or crawler, simply sat down and watched her approach. When she was close enough to touch, she knelt, her red jeans creaking, and extended her hand. Shadow sniffed it, then, impossibly, licked it. Well, Mom Jessie said, and that's something. She turned to Nathaniel, and he could read her expression. It was wonder. You done saved this creature, she said. You done brought it back from the inn. He was there, Nathaniel said. He was alone. So were you, Mom Jessie replied. So were all of us. She sat down on a full log, moved slowly, settled her bones. Shadow watched her with cautious interest but did it retreat. The forest was silent around them, holding his breath. I ain't connected to no one, she said. You know that. But I caught to you, boy. This ain't a secret that can last forever. That wolf cornered get bigger. Cornered need more food. Cornered need more space. And someday it cornered need to go back to some kin. I know. Do you? Do you really? She looked at him hard. La fin semester corner closes the hardest in the rose. I done it more times than I can't. Lost my mom more in I was younger than you. Lost my children when they saw them more. Lost my man when his heart kept in the field. Every time it near killed me. But I kept on if. You know why? Nathaniel shook his head. Because the laugh mattered more than the losen. The time I had with them, half for short, was all the bin that came after. That's the trade we make when we let ourselves care about the needs in the soul. The bin is the brace, but the laugh is the brace. She reached at Antish's face, her hand rained gentle. You keep laugh for that wolf, she said. Laugh it was a freeze you caught. But be ready. Be ready for what's coming, because something is coming. I can feel it in my bones, the way I feel stones before the back. Something is coming, and when it gets here, you're gonna need all the strength you can find. Nathaniel did ask what she meant. He didn't need it. He always did know Cocker was watching. He had seen the overseers eyes on him after that, bishit and hungry. He had felt the pressure in case, the criticism grown sharper, the punishments more frequent for smaller and smaller infractions. He knew Cocker was looking for something, and that eventually, inevitably, he would find it. The only question was who? The answer came on the night of November 23 or the 1979. Nathaniel had been careless. That's what he would sneak later, in the indecisive of documents that followed. He had been careless because he had led himself to feel safe. Shadow was nearly held. The wolf could run, could hunt small prey, was almost strong enough to survive alone. In a few more weeks, Nathaniel had thought, he could release Shadow back into the world, they could be, preserve the secret forever. He had been careless, and carelessness was death. Cocker followed him. Nathaniel didn't see him, didn't hear him, didn't sense him at all. The overseer had spent weeks on Nathaniel's routine, mapper his movements, identify the path he took to the forest. On this night, Cocker had positioned himself ahead of time, hidden the underbush near the rock tree, which was the bushes that was a secret swamp. Nathaniel arrived at the cavity as always, called softly for Shadow, reached into the hole out create his run. Shadow merged, Telwaker, no longer a Bob, but a young wolf, lean and strong and beautiful in the money. Answering Cocker instead of the shadows. Well, he said, and the synthesis. Nathaniel's blood turned taste. The overseer held a rifle, not a yet, just held loosely, a promise of fearless rather than its immediate application. His face, what Nathaniel could see in the darkness, was calm. Satisfied. All this time, Cocker said, I've been wondering what you was hidden. What was so important that you'd sneak at every night, steal food, risk a freeze? He looked at Shadow, who had begun to crawl, a lower sand. And it's a wolf. A damn wolf. Please, Nathaniel said. The word came out before he could stop it. Please, he's not hurting anyone. He's just. Shut up. The common Cocker's face was worse than Anker. Anker could be survived. It burned hot and sad fast. This was something else, the good satisfaction of a man who had finally found what he was looking for. You've been stealing food from the planters to feed a wild animal. That's the rest. You've been late for the quarters after curfew. That's foolish standard orders. You've been maintaining a dangerous predator on plantish property. That's reckless and dangerous. He smelled a thin, terrible smell. Anyone of those is enough for serious benchum. All three together. He raised the rifle, pointed at Shadow. First, I'm going to shoot this animal. Then, I'm going to drag you back the quarters until the boast. And tomorrow morning, in front of everyone, I'm going to teach you a lesson you won't ever going to forget. Nathaniel moved with that snacking. He threw himself between the rifle and the wolf, almost Bradway, his body broke over the shore. It was insane. It was so sad. But he didn't care. He could to Shadow Day. He could stand by while the only thing he had ever left was destroyed in front of him. Move, Cocker said. No. The word surprised both of them. Nathaniel had never said no to an overseer. He had never said no to anyone authority. The word felt foreign in his mouth, dangerous, revolutionary. No, he said Deka. You're not going to hurt him. Cocker stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. You stupid little fool, he said. You think you get a choice. You think neither yourself or do matters. Your property, boy. You don't get say no. You don't get half a beans. You don't get listeners. You're a tool, and tools don't have feelers. He started forward, the rifle stressed. Now move, or he'll shoot through you to get it. Nathaniel didn't move. He looked at Shadow, at his ozzy yellow eyes watching him with something that looked like understanding. He looked at Cochran, at his hatred and contempt that had always been there, now for their feel. He thought about his mother, who he had never known. He thought about his father, who he would never find. He thought about Mom Jessie, who had taught him that life was worth the pain. Then shoot, he said. Cochran's finger rotated on the trigger. In Shadow held. The sound was unlike any Nathaniel had ever heard. It wasn't a bark, not a crawl, not any of the sounds Shadow had made before. It was a howl, long and piercing and impossible. A sound that seemed come from somewhere deeper than the wolf throat, from somewhere ancient and weird and beyond human understanding. They allows into the net sky and echoed through the forest and disappeared into the darkness. And then, impossibly, it was unsaid. First one face, destined somewhere to the north. Then another, closer to the east. Then more and more until the forest was life was hollow, a chorus of wolves responded shadows call, their voices overlapped van harmonizer and a sound that mad cocker lore has rifle in confusion Sunny look about the trees was wonder. Shadow had been below in Sunny Sanham. But wolves are back animals. They search for their own. And somewhere there, in the months since the injury, Shadow's back had been looking for him, fallen his seventh, waiting for a sea. Now they had one. Cocker recovered quickly. Here as the rifle can, pointed at the darkness from which the hella came, his hand steadied speed the uncertainty in his eyes. Don't matter, he said. Don't matter how many of them there are. They're just animals. They'll scatter at the first shot. I am that Shadow again. Last chance, boy. Move. Nisanil didn't move. The shot never came. Because at that moment, the wolves arrived. They came from a free direction at once, crash besmtiri laser from the darkness like coasters, sailed and south, their eyes captured the moonlight and reflected back as buoys of yellow fire. Nisanil would later treat and the man fall. In the chaos, it seemed like dozens. In reality, recorded what would leave birds would later tell stories about wolfback season 19th century Mississippi, there were probably torn deaths, bless suffered joffens. It was more than enough. Cocker saw them come rather than any man would do. He turned the rifle toward the nearest Shaban field. They shot cracks through the night like thunder. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf yelled. But the back didn't scatter. They didn't run. They didn't behave though Cocker expected enemies to behave in the breeze of yom weapons and fields. They kept coming. Shadow moved first. The young wolf, no longer a bub, no longer weak, launched himself at the Cocker with impossible speed. As those clouded around the officer's forearm, the arm holder the rifle, and the web flew from Cocker's crib, disappearing into the underclothes. Cocker screamed. It was a sound Sanil had never heard from the man, a sound he had to believe the man was capable of making. All those years of calm cruelty, of abyshed fearless, of absolute control, and an cynical heartbeat, Cocker was just another animal stream of burning fear, like any creature that suddenly finds itself breasted of predator. The other was circled. They didn't attack immediately. They moved around Cocker in a battle that seemed almost choreographed, cut off his scabrous, held him away from Sanil and Shadow, creating a barrier of tissue muscle between the overseer and his intended victims. Shadow laced Cocker's arm and backed, positioned himself at Nisanil's side. Blood dripped from the wolf's muzzle. His eyes never left Cocker. Cocker scrambled backward, clutching his wounded arm, his face weight was shockable. He looked at the wolf surrounding him. He looked at Nisanil. He looked at Shadow. And for the first time since Nisanil had known him, the overseer seemed genuinely afraid. Call them off, he said. His face was different now, stripped of its usual confidence, reveal a sensor desperate underneath. Call them off, and they let you go. I swear it. I'll forget this ever happened. Just call them off. Nisanil didn't move. He didn't speak. He wasn't sure he could have spoken if he wanted. The word had become an ale, dreamlike, a fever vision which a prisoner he had ever been taught barbarian hierarchy was being overrun in front of his eyes. He was a 9-year-old slave boy. Cocker was a crewman, no overseer, a representative of the entire system that had controlled Nisanil's life since birth. And yet here, in this moonlit clearer, the balance had shifted. The wolf didn't care about slavery. They didn't recognize the authority of white man over black color. They recognized only the bond between Shadow and Nisanil, the bond Nisanil had cleared through 6 weeks of love and care and sacrifice. The back was responded to that bond. They were protect their own, and somehow, impossibly, Nathaniel had become one as their own. Coker tried to run. He made it 3 steps before the wolves closed in. They didn't kill him, not immediately. They knocked him down, bind him to the ground, their teeth at his throat and on the neck, held him bless with the deliver of the final day. It was a hunter technique Nathaniel would later, used by wolf to mobilize to lodge to kill quickly. They would hold an animal down and would for it exhaust itself, and only then would they finish the job. But these wolves did finish the job. They held Cocker down, killed, their breath hot on his face, and they waited. They were waiting for Nathaniel. He understood this so that none had understood it. The back was looking at him for guidance, for instruction, for a decision about what should happen next. Shadow had brought them here. But Nathaniel was his own shadow had bonded with, and in the calculus of the back, that made Nathaniel the authority. He could tell them to kill Cocker. He was certain of this. One gesture, one sound, and the wolves would tear their overseer apart. It would be justice. It would be refund for every blow, every insult, every moment of cruelty Cocker had inflicted on him and everyone else at Hotwood. It would be payment for all the dead Cocker had spent over the years, for all the spirits he had brought, for all the life they had destroyed. Nathaniel looked at his man on the ground. He saw the fear in Cocker's eyes. He saw the blood on his arm where Shadow had the tomb. He saw a young being stripped off all his bearer, dust the same helplessness that Cocker had put so many years. And Nathaniel made a choice. Let him go, he said. The words came back quite bit clear. Shadow is brutal. The other wolf jested, answered, their cross softened. Let him go, Nathaniel repeated. He is not worth it. Shadow looked at him for a long moment, though the yellow expression his face for Samsa. Then the young wolf made a sound, a short bark that might have been acknowledgement or might have been disappointment, and stepped back from Cocker. The other wolf followed. They released their cribble they off their limbs, but well, reformed their circle at a greater distance. Cocker lay on the ground, gasping, bleeding, staring up at Nathaniel's expression that combined terror and confusion some that might have been the beginning of a question who would never be able to test. Nathaniel did do it for him to recover. He did do it for explanations or negotiations or any of this and that might have happened in a world that made sense. He simply turned, blessed his hand on Shadow's head, and began to talk. The wolf bolted it let him through. Then they clawed ranks behind him, formed an escort, a left hole between Nathaniel and a freeze and he was left behind. He didn't look back. The forest opened before him, familiar and strange at the same time. The trees he had known all his life now transformed into something else, a baswa rather than a boundary, a road somewhere rather than a breeze holding him bliss. The moon was high and bright, casting a flat sea bay, and the wolves moved around him like shadows, like dreams, like creatures from a story someone metal but no one would believe. They walked for hours. Nathaniel lost track of time, lost track of distance, lost track of a freeze except the rhythm of his feet on the forest floor and the breezes of Shadow at his side. The wolves seemed to know where they were going, if he did. They led him through thickets and across streams, around obstacles he couldn't see in the darkness, below bars no human had ever traveled. He thought about Mom Jessie as he walked. He thought about her warning, her prediction that something was coming. He thought about her cadence, her teaching of, the years she had spent keeping him alive when no one is scared whether he left or died. He wished he could have said goodbye. He wished he could have thanked her. He wished a lot of things that didn't matter anymore because the past was behind him and the only direction that existed now was forward. He thought about his mother, the lavender smell that was his only memory of her. He thought about his father, so do before Nathaniel could form a cynical image of his face. He thought about all the people who had been lost, all the families torn apart, all the lives stolen by the system Cocker represented. And he thought about revenge. He had chosen not to kill Cocker. He had chosen mercy when vengeance was available, forgiveness when hatred would have been justified. He didn't regret the choice. But he also didn't forget. Hij wordt in de ververket ze met bemreef kokkerskulti, ze met bemreef hot woord zijn geste. Het woord stoos hem vooraffer, hij woont dat met helbet woord olwasleef eskor. Sam bibol, nsani lander stodief etinen yerzod, de dezer verkeffenis. Sam kishensko de bierdiemed. Betkelen kokker woord het endoze bast. Het woord het friese bibol stiltab et hot woord. Het woord het chan de system zat had creëert het kokker nan woord creëert zer zlekhem. Zeon van de zat mater doos serfif. Zeon effectorizat kent doos freedom. Aan freedom was de had afhem, samoaren ze dorgens, oeto. Ze wolf stobas dom bekante brek. Nisanil had been moker for 5 years, maybe 6, hes lekkeriken, hes barfit blieder from eides ketsansraudes. Hij had klosteren zat should have been possible for it shield nafka, trafeld eidestes zat should have taken des raverzan eisen hakelne. But the wolf had carried him through it, kede him around obstacles, said a base that was fast but not impossible. Never stood at the edge of a clearer, and beyond the clearer, Nsanil could see smoke. Not the smoke of destruction, the smoke of cockfears. Cabes, aides of the mabimor, engine a loscaster and a central. Cordes, even of umber, shows the romans of a let harvest. Chickens in a yard. A cane a small pasture. An bibol, black bibol, men anom mof of between the cabes, torter the dazork, their movement relaxen a win sanil had never seen at hotwood. There were no overseers or chua. No quotas it meat. This bibol mof like bibol on their own team, their own herber, their own nave. A faden set element. Nisanil had heard rumors of such places, communities established before Marlies left bibol who had managed to queer land, either so bullish or so the federal homestead programs that had briefly existed or of reconstruction. The settlements were scattered across Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana, island of freedom and ocean for British, serfif so isolation self-sufficiency and the willingness of the residents to defend themselves against anyone who tried to take what they had. This settlement had no official name. It would later be known as Freeman's Ridge, after the family that had founded in 1868. The Freemans or free people of color, descended of a black man who had burst his own liberty in 1842 and spent the next 26 years working to free his family members on Bay 1. By the end of the Civil War, the lordsties of Freemans, and they had used their combined resources to buy 300 acres of land nobody else wanted because it was too rocky for coal. It turned out to be excellent land for their sinners, cords, orchards, small livestock. This settlement had grown slowly but steadily, absorbed refugees from surrounding plantations, building a community invisible at most of the way to their structure simply because it existed in a place that did Caribbean. Nisanil started at this settlement, at the smoke and the cabins the people, and fed Samson recorded now. It was too big for him to understand at 9 years old. How ban fear and long and disbelief, all mixed together. A storm of emotion that made his chest tighten his whisper. Shadowed his hand. Nisani looked down at the wolf, at those ways that had been cladded with 5 or 6 weeks ago and shone clear and bright in the moonlight. Shadow still walked slowly back and forth, a gesture Nsanil had learned to recognize as a fetish. This is it, Nsanil said. Isn't it? Shadow didn't answer. Wolf can't speak. But the young wolf looked toward the settlement, then back at Nsanil, and the message was clear. Go. This is where you belong? Will I see you again? Shadow tilted his head. Behind him, the other wolves were already beginning to drift back into the forest, their shapes dissolved into the undergrowth, their breezes faded like mist and sunny. They had a know they came though. They had protected one of their own. Never were returned to their own world, the world of forests and hands and backbones that humans could never fully understand. Shadow was the last to go. He stood at his head of the trees for a long moment, looking at Nsanil's expression that seemed almost ominous complexity. Their name had a sound, a soft wind that might have been caught by, and turned and vanished into the forest. Nsanil stood alone at his head of the clearing. He was 9 years old. He was barefoot and bleeding and desolate. Hij was een skeptslaaf, fugitive, كمان كردر تزلازت في الكريستدن السبيدس بيت constitution amendments that had supposed the liberalistism stosh. Hij had nesset offer the people in the system to blow. No family, no connections, no skills except the one mom Jessie had taught him. But he was free. For the first time in his life, he was free. He walked down the hill toward the settlement. The first person to see him was a woman in Morse frame, the wife of the settlement's founder. She was carrying water from the well as she noticed the small figure about Shunner, a she'd tumbled out of the forest was blood on his feet and a look in his eyes that she recognized immediately. She had seen that look before. She had worn that look herself, 40 years ago, when she had escaped from a plantation in Alabama and worked for 6 days to reach her husband's farm. It was the look of someone who had passed through fear and come at the other side, burned bitty leaf, change forever but the standard. Morris set down her water bucket and walked toward the boy. You all right, child, she asked. Nisani looked at her. He opened his mouth and said, and there was a torrent, he began to cry. It was the first time he had cried since he was 5 years old. The tears came from somewhere deep inside him, a reservoir of grief and fear and relief that had been building for years and could no longer be contained. He cried for his mother, who he had never known. He cried for his father, who he would never find. He cried for Mom Jessie, who had given him a freezer she had. He cried for Shadow, who had given him back his life. Morris framed the ask questions. She did demand explanations. She simply wrapped her arms around the sober boy and held him the way his mother might have if she had lived, though no one had had him since he was small enough to fit in Mom Jessie's lap. It's all right, she said. You're safe now. You're safe. They settlement took him. They fed him. They cleaned his wounds. They kept him close that feet and I bet that was his alone. They didn't ask where he came from or had he had escaped or what had happened in the forest. They know some stories needed time before they could be told. Someone is needed help before they could be examined. What they did ask, eventually, was his name. Nathaniel told them, just Nathaniel. He had never had a surname. Enslaved people all often need family names, and there were first their identities and their connections to the past. Well, said James Frame, the founder of the settlement, you need a full name. A full name? What do you want to be called? Nathaniel thought about it. He thought about his mother and his father and Mom Jessie. He thought about Shadow and the wolf and the net in the forest. He thought about the future, whatever it might hold, and the past, which he could never fully leave behind. Frame, he said. Nathaniel Frame. James nodded. Could name him? Strong name? A name for a man who chooses his own path. Nathaniel stayed at his settlement. The months that followed were a flash. For the first time in his life, he experienced what meant to work for himself rather than for someone else's growth. He helped in the cold and the orchards, learned to care for the livestock, assisted with construction of no cabins as the refugees left from surrounding plantations. He wasn't strong at first, but things came with a proper food and not could withstand the knowledge that his labor belonged to him. He also continued his education here. One of the settlements residents was a man named Thomas, who had been a medical assistant in New Orleans before the war, and be a French doctor who had believed black men were capable of learning matters. Thomas recognized Nathaniel's knowledge immediately, so the foundation Mom Jessie had built, and began teaching him the form science that complemented the folk wisdom he had inherited. Nathaniel learned about anatomy and diagnosis, about infections and their treatment, about the herbs and minerals that could help and those that could harm. He studied the free medical book Thomas and, later let into the net becandly, absorbing information was a hacker that surprised himself. By the time he was 15, he was the settlement's primary healer. By 20, his reputation had spread around the communities, and people would travel for miles to consult with the man who had a gift for medicine and a gentleness that Botif demonstrated bishop at ease. He married at 22. Her name was Claire, school teacher from another settlement who had come to Freeman's to establish a school for the children. She was short and fierce and beautiful, and she saw Nisanil Samasagazes might have missed the capacity for crap that he had learned from a wolf in a forest long ago. They had 4 children together, 2 boys and 2 girls. Nisanil told them the story of Shadow and they were old enough to understand, told them about the wolf but in the hole and the wicks of secret visits and the net on the back had come to save him. The lesson was Wade is, not sure if they believed him, but said he was telling the truth. He also told them about Mom Jessie. He had tried over the years to find out what had happened to her. Information was scarce. هوتوود بلنتش had عندهن زن 1881 صادفتر كنسيلس هوتوود ديد فاببلكسي بوسبي بوتون بيز ستوريز about what had happened to his officer on the night of November 23 أوردي 1879. The new owners had dismantled the old system, noted of moral conviction, but economic necessity, transition of Cherkrober like most other Caesar plantations. What happened to the workers who had left there, including Mom Jessie, was unclear. The records were incomplete. The people had scattered. The past had swallowed them up, as it had swallowed so many others. Nisanil never stopped hoping she had survived, that somewhere in the chaotic expanse of the sea, an old woman was still alive, still mix of her poultices and cousin herbs, still carrying the knowledge she had passed on to him. He never found evidence of this. He never found evidence of the contrary, either. Some questions, he learned, simply never get answered. Cochrane, on the other hand, was easier to track. The officer had survived the night of the wolves. His injuries were serious, a deep bite wound on his arm, multiple lacerations on his leg and torso, but not fatal. He had managed to drag himself back the Blantish builders by dawn, life about what had happened, about the boy and the wolves and the impossible rescue. No one believed him. This story was too outlandish, too fantastic, too much like the superstitious tales left people told each other in the quarters. A pack of wolves could not rescue a child. A wolf that remembered being herself and built some literary sulfur. It sounded like folk legend, not the rational, or the word witness being the belief they inhabited. Cochrane insisted the story was true. He described the wolves in detail, described Shadow's attack, described the moment when Nisanil had stopped the pack from killing him. He became obsessed with the story, told it to anyone who would listen, and many would. Within a year, he had been dismissed from Hotwood. The new overseer found him unreliable, distracted, brought down current trusts about with and fungus and a boy who had commanded with animals like a sorcerer. Cochrane drifted from Blantish to Blantish after that, never left alone, his reputation following him like a curse. He did in 1899 bossat a border has natches, lone and buffers, still telling his story to anyone who would listen. The cause of death was listed as a failure, but everyone who knew him said it was his wolf. The wolf had killed him, not with their teeth, but with the shaman that and the son raflan of a reason he had believed about himself and his place in the world. It was, Nisanil thought when he heard the news, a more fitter punishment than this would have been. The years passed. Nisanil's children grew up and had children of their own. The settlement expanded, weathered the storms of Jim Crow and the systematic destruction of black advancement that characterized the late 19th centuries. Freeman's Ridge survived because its people were stubborn, self-sufficient and willing to fight for what they had. Nisanil became an elder, a patriarch, the keeper of the community's history, and the teacher of its children. He continued to practice medicine to his 70s, his hands still steady, his knowledge still sought after, his reputation extended far beyond the boundaries of the settlement. And every full moon, he would go to the edge of the forest and stand there, listen. Sometimes he heard wolves. Wolf populations in the had declined dramatically by the turn of the century, and it nearly be farmers and ranchers also the Mazaret livestock. But in the deepest forests, in places where humans rarely went, a few bucks to survive. And sometimes, on nights when the moon was bright and the wind was right, their hells would carry across the maze to where Nisanil stood. He never saw Shadow. He never expected it. Wolf's life on let was 15 years old, and shadow would have been an old wolf by 1800 في surface that long. But Nsani Lekitson shadow had left well, had led his back through the forest, had raised webs of his own and taught the motor for West Stitch Zarian. He Lekitson that somewhere in that lineage, the generations of wolves descend from shadow's back, there was a memory. Not a conscious memory, not wicked human af, but some deeper, instinct, a recognition, a trace of the bond formed in a hollowness doctrine zotum of 1879. It was in 1932 that Nsani told the story to the envoy from the Federators project. Her name was Cedar Mitchell. She was 24, a recent graduate of the University of Mississippi, one of hundreds of writers employed by those bureaucrats to document the stories of formerly enslaved Americans before those stories were lost forever. She had been sent to free Missouri after her rumors about an old man with an unusual history, a man who escaped from slavery enforced worse than was the rumors could tweet. Nisanil was a Tito as she arrived. His hair was white, his face laid with decades of Sanano and Marie, but his eyes were still sharp, still ray, still carrying that quality Cocker had not 60 years before, the quality someone would Sharan would remember the freeze. He was elected to speak at the first. He had told the story many times over the years, to his children and grandchildren, to friends and neighbors, to the legend during the story of their way to the settlement. But telling it a stranger was different. Telling it a white stranger was more different still. Cedar Mitchell was a big shit. She visited several times before asking her any questions, Halab was chores, Ben was the childer, demonstrator she was there to judge or exploit, but some bit less. She bought him gifts, small sinners, a no babe, some tobacco, a book of poetry by Dolores Dunbar that she thought he might enjoy. On her first visit, he became taught. The interview took 3 days. Nisanil spoke slowly, carefully, making sure every detail was correct, every faint blessing its proper context. He described how to and Cocker na mom Jessie. He described finder the wolf bob in the hollow, the week's secret visits, the net on the freeze or change. He described the wolf's emerger from the forest, Shadow's attack on Cocker, the long walk through the darkness to Freeman's Ridge. Cedar wrote a freezer in her net, careful handwritten. When she didn't understand some of, she asked questions. When she suspected Nsani was holding back, she waited until he was ready to continue. She was, he told his family later, a good listener. At the end of the subtle, she asked one final question. Looking back on a freeze that happened, she said, what do you think it means? What lesson did you take from it? Nisanil sat in silence for a long time, considering the question. They told me I was an animal, he finally said. They told me I had no soul, no feelings, no right love or be left. They told me I was a property, I shouldn't be used and discarded. And I believed them for a while. When you hear something enough from enough people, you start to think it must be true. I paused, looking at the window at the forest border of the settlement. But then I found that wolf Bob, and I loved him, and I cared for him, and I gave him a piece of myself. And I gave me a piece of himself back, animal, a creature that was lower than me, more savage than me, more worthless than me. And that animal taught me more about being human than any man ever did. I turned back to Cedar, his eyes bright with something that might have been tears. Villares I learned this, kindness doesn't know boundaries. It doesn't care about species or race or omniscience. When you plan cadence in the world, you never know where it's going to grow. You never know who's going to harvest it. But it grows, and spreads, and eventually it comes back to you. It always comes back. He smiled, the same smile I had smiled for a decade, the smile that had surfaced very free and worse than a legitimate structure. That wolf saved my life because I saved his life first. That's not magic. That's not superstition. That's just the way the world works when we let it work. The laugh we give comes back to us. Maybe not in the way we expect. Maybe not when we expect it. But it comes back. Seller finished later and looked up at him. Do you have any regrets, she asked. A bit afraid. Nathaniel shook his head. I wish I could have said goodbye to Mom Jessie. I wish I could have found my father. I wish a lot of things. But regrets. I shook his head again. No. Every choice I made led me here, to this place, to this family, this life. And this life has been good. Hard sometimes, painful sometimes, but good. He stood up slowly, his old joints creaking, and out the window. I tell you something else, he said. I'm an old man now. I've seen a lot, lived through a lot. And there's once a referend, it's that the people are others, the cookers of the world, they don't win. Not in the end. They might have a better for a while. They might make life miserable for a lot of people. But eventually, their head destroys them. It eats them up from the inside. It makes them small and bitter and alone. He turned back to the sir. But the people who laugh, the people who kiff, the people who plan can see phone can seems impossible, they grow. They build families and communities Alexis that last for generations. They had days with the haters, but the laugh keeps going. He pointed at the window toward the settlement, toward the children playing in the yard, the dead sorting in the corridors, the smoke razor from the cookfires. That's my revenge, he said. All of this. Every child that grows up here free. Every family that builds a life on this land. Every generation that carries the story forward. That's my revenge on Cochran and Hotwood and everyone who tried to tell me I was Nasser. I'm not Nasser. I'm Nathaniel Frame, and I built this. Sarah Mitchell Frame read the next day. She typed upper notes on a borrowed typewriter, submitted them to the Federator's project office in Jacks, and most don't turn next to same. The transcript of her interview with Nathaniel Frame was catalogued and filed, one document of thousands, a cynical thread in the vast tapestry of American history. Nathaniel died 6 months later, in the spring of 1963. He passed away in his sleep, surrounded by his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the cabin he had built with his own hands on that belonged to man his family forever. On the night he died, the people of Frames rejoiced with valor in the forest. It was a new jour. Wolf said had become base 1930 and also refresh. But on that night, under a full moon that shone bright and clear through the windows of Nathaniel's cab, the hills rose from the trees and echoed across the settlement, one face, and then another, a chorus that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Some of the younger people were frightened. Wolves were supposed to be dangerous, after all. Wolves were supposed to be stress. But the other residents, the ones who know Nathaniel's story, the ones who had heard him tell it over and over for decades, they weren't afraid. They stood on their porches and listened to the howls, and then understood. The wolves were saying goodbye. Or maybe they were saying, welcome home. Nathaniel Frame was buried on a hill overlooking the settlement, under an oak tree he had planted himself 40 years before. His grave marker was simple, just as Naaman has that son a cynical line he had requested before he died. It read, the laugh we give comes back. And beneath that, carved small enough that you had to look closely to see it, was the image of a wolf. The story of Nathaniel unshadowed it in those Nathaniel's death. His descendants carried it forward, to did their children and grandchildren, kept it live through the generations. Freeman survived the Great Brush and World War II and the civil rights movement and all the changes that transformed America in the 20th century. The community grew and evolved, but it never forgot its founder story. In 1979, exactly 100 years after the night the wolf came, Nathaniel's great-granddaughter stood in front of a classroom at the University of Mississippi and delivered a lecture on oral history and the preservation of African American folk narratives. Her name was Dr. Constance Ray Walker, and she was the first 10-year black professor in her department's history. She told the story of Nathaniel and Shadow as part of her lecture. She displayed the transcript from the Federator's project. She showed photographs of Freeman's ridge, of Nsanil and Hazodage, of the craft marker on the hill. And as she said some asrar grandfather might have appreciated. Some people hear the story and ask if it's true, she said. They want to know if can really coordinate rescue missions. They want to know if a wild animal can really form a bond with a human child. They want evidence, documentation, scientific proof. She paused, looked at her studies. I can't give them that. I can only give them the testimony of a man who was there, who lived through it, who carried the story for 8 years. And I can give them this question, does it matter? She let the question run there. Whether the wolf coordinated consciously or acted on instinct, the result was the same. A child was safe. A man built a life and a family and a community that existed. A story was created that has inspired 5 generations of Freemans and countless others who have heard it. She smiled, the same smile that had been passed down through her family for a century. The bear of the story is not another if detail is literally true. The bear is what it teaches us. That kindness matters. That the life we give comes back to us. That even the dark circumstances, if one freeze seems hopeless, connection is possible, between human, between species, because all the boundaries within a corpus. She held up the transcript. Nisan il-Frame was born into slavery. He did a free man, surrounded by family, on at that he owned. That transformation did not happen because of the wolves alone. It happened because Nisan believed that life was possible, that kindness was fallible, that a free life creature deserves care and compassion. The wolves are just the universes who have confirmed what he already know. She said the transcript down. That's the rest of the story. That's the less my grandfather wanted pass on. And that's the less I'm pass on to you today. The lecture ended. The students uploaded. Some of them cried. And the story continued, move forward through time, teacher no lives, planter no seeds of kindness that would send the bloom was no one could predict. Because that's what stories do. They carry truth across generations. They connect to people who in format and blesses will never see. They remind us we are both something larger than ourselves, each a human experience that stretches back into the past and forward into the future. Nisan il-Frame understood this. That's why he told the story تسعر متشلن 1932. If that love was painful, if though know some people would it, he told it because no stories have bar. He told it because he wanted future generations to know that kindness matters, that love is worth the risk, that if a 9-year-old slave boy can change the world by self a wolf. And he was right. The story is still being told today. It's being told right now, in these words, there are all years and was the distance that separates us from that forest in 1979. The wolves are still here. The moonlight is still sheen. And a boy named Nsanil is still walking toward freedom, guided by the creatures they saved and the life he planted in a world that told them life was impossible. That's the truth of the story. That's the truth of all stories. The life we give comes back. All others? In the forest Mississippi, where the rivers still and dark and the trees still hold their secrets, there always they come. Conservation efforts in the latter 2021 centuries have allowed wolf populations to recover in parts of the Americas, reintroduce predators to ecosystems and balance for over a century. The new wolf is known as Nisan il-Frame or Shadow or the net in November 1979. Wolves don't tell stories the way humans do. They don't record history or build monuments or write books. But they remember neither others. They remember through instinct, through behavior, through the battles the flesh has inscribed in their genes over millions of years. They remember what it means to be part of a pack, to protect their own, to answer the call when one of them is in trouble. And sometimes, on its own the moon is full and bright, they have. The sun carries because the mears, because forests are fields, because time itself. It carries the echo of a free wolf that came before, a free pack that ran through these woods, a free bond that formed between creatures of and each other the doctrines. Include one specific bond, one specific hell, one specific net one eight shield and a with change each other's life forever. Less carefully on the next full moon. Ook to zed as the forest if you can. Stand in the doctrines and maybe you'll hear them. Maybe you'll understand. The laugh wake comes back. It echoes through generations. It causes boundaries that seem impossible. It's as little as we can ever predict. That's what Insani learned. That's what the wolf taught him. And that's what they're still teaching to anyone who learned less, on a free full moon.